theyeshiva.net.
We're at the end of Daf Beis. Mamash at the end of Beis Amid Beis. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 lines from the bottom. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi taught us yesterday. We learned yesterday. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi taught it. He didn't only teach it yesterday. He taught it a long time ago. But we learned it yesterday. That every city that has a wall, obviously you read on Tesvav as the Mishnah tells us. But the Chiddush is that any city that is near it, even though you may not be visible from it, or conversely, any city that is visible from the fortified city, even though that city on its own is not fortified, it assumes the same halachic status as the Krach. The Krach is the city that has a wall, and therefore you read there on Tesvav. That's how we explained the redundancy in the Megillah that Hayam Melin is Karn Venasim, Bechol Der Vadar Mishpacha, Mishpacha, Medina Medina, and Ir Ve'ir. That's a good question. The Gemarah asks about Medina, Medina, Ir Ve'ir. Why aren't you asking about Mishpacha, Mishpacha? How many types of families are there? How many types of families? So the Gemarah is going to discuss that on Daf Gimel Amar Aleph. It's a good question. Asks the Gemarah at Kama. When you say a city is close, what does it mean close? Close means 10 feet. Close means 100 feet. What does close mean? You say it's close. I don't know what close means. An hour drive is close. I mean, what's close? You say samach, it's very ambiguous. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Taka says samach, but Rashi says ad kama chashav la samach. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah answered v'itaymer Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Some say it was not Rabbi Yirmiyah, it was Rabbi Chia, the son of Abba. I just want to point out again, you see the Gemarah quotes it from Rabbi Yirmiyah, but the Gemarah says some people say it's not Rabbi Yirmiyah. In other words, it's very relevant to know who answered. Was it Rabbi Yirmiyah, was it Rabbi Chia bar Abba? The Gemarah feels important to record who is the author of this response. It's not somebody said it. Not somebody, Rabbi Yirmiyah or Rabbi Chia. The answer is, K'mei Chamson l'Tveria. It's basically the distance from Chamson to Tveria. That's the maximum distance. If it's more than the distance from, in other words, Chamson to Tveria, fits this criteria, that it's considered close. But if it's more than that, if it's a larger distance, not. What's Chamson to Tveria? Which is mil. Now, the measurement of a mil is 2,000 amas, which in today's measurements, a mil is basically approximately 1 kilometer. 1 kilometer, which is, of course, less than a mile, somewhat less than a mile. That's approximately the measurement of a mil. So if it's 1 kilometer, it's considered samach. Usually in Israeli measurements, they do between 960 and 1,200 meters, approximately. There's a debate in that size, but approximately between 960 and 1160 meters. So it's a question between 200 meters. So approximately a kilometer, that's what it is. Asks the Gemarah v'leima mil. I don't understand. Why did Rabbi Yirmiyah have to say? It's like from Chamson to Tveria. Just say it's mil. It's a kilometer. What does he have to give? What does he have to give? An example of 2 cities. Hakamashmalan, he wanted to tell us the shiura, the mil kama ava, k'mei Chamson l'Tveria. Sometimes a person doesn't know what a mil is. So that's why he killed 2 birds with 1 stone. He wanted to tell you that it's taka a mil, but he also wanted to tell you how much a mil is. He said a mil is the exact distance from the town or the city called Chamson to the city called Tveria. So that's the maskana, that if it's samuch or nira, it gets treated like a krach. So apparently we have 2 qualifications for a city to be treated as a fortified city. Qualification number 1 is close, even if you can't see it. For whatever reason, I can't see it, right? The wall doesn't allow me to see anything. Or qualification number 2 is, if it's nearer, if I could see it. And it would seem, from the literal interpretation of the Gemarah, at least the way Rashi sees it, that these are 2 separate things. Nira afal pi she'enei samach, and samach afal pi she'enei nira. That's what Rashi says. It's 2 separate things. That means if I could see the city, even if it's much further than a kilometer, but if I could see it, I could still read there on Tesvav and not Yudalit. I have to read on Tesvav. That's what it seems from Rashi. That's what the Rashba says, that seeing does not require anymore it should be close. Even if it's very far, Even if it's mamish far, it's miles away. But if it's nira from this city, I could see it. I just want to say that this is what the Rashba says, this is what seems from Rashi. When you read Rashi, Rashi says there's two separate conditions and they're not dependent on each other. I just want to bring out, especially this in the Megillah Halacha, that there are Rishonim who disagreed with this. And they said that this is, they did not think this is the Pshat in the Gemarah, and therefore they add the limitations I discussed yesterday. Some of the Rishonim say that it's not enough that you see the city. I'm standing in this city and I could see that there's another city, but rather the entire shetach, the entire territory, the entire ground of the open city, the unfortified city, has to be seen well and clearly from the fortified city. So that would be a unique condition that would obviously make it a little harder. That's what the Meiri says. Some Rishonim say, Nira Imai means that from far, when you look from far, they look like connected cities. It looks connected. The Ritva says, the Ran says, and the Meiri says that it means that this unfortified city joins the fortified city, means it's subservient to it. It's basically like an extension of it in terms of the services of the city. So these are all limitations that some Rishonim say on the near. It's not just stam. You could stand in the city and you see a building from another city or a tower, and you say, "Oh, that's called the nira imai."
What do we call suburbs?
Yeah. And it's interesting that the Rambam and the Torah, they say that nira, the definition of mil is also for nira, meaning it's not two separate things. It's mamish one thing. The definition of mil is also for nira. So both for samuch and nira, it has to be a mil. So it's not just he said this on samuch, but nira could be even further. But rather that's how the Rambam and the Torah clearly show that the limitation of mil, so they understood the Gemarah a little different. It's not just if it's nira, even if it's very far, but it has to be a mil. Yeah. Everything it becomes like the krach. Okay, this is a big discussion in Poskim, but I just wanted to point this out about how we treat the issue. Yeah, of course, by him in his house, he could see the him. So the Gemarah says, "V'amar Rabbi Yirmiyah." Rabbi Yirmiyah said, "V'yiteimer Reb Chiya bar Rabba." And Reb Chiya bar Rabba also says, again, this is the same author with the same debate of who said it. Man tzapach tzoifim amorim. The letter is Mem Nun Sadik Pei Langechav Tzoifim amorim. They were said by the tzoifim. Tzoifim means visionaries, right? Tzoifia. Tzoifim means to see. The prophets are called tzoifim. Rashi says, Man tzapach koifel oisius tzoifim amorim nevi'ei hadoiris. The prophets of the generations. Here the Gemarah enters into a new sugya, quoting earlier Rabbi Yirmiyah and Reb Chiya bar Rabba. They taught us something new. There's something called Mansapach. What's Mansapach? There are 5 letters in the Hebrew alphabet that have double letters. Only 5. Mem. There's a regular mem and what we call a mem seifis, or a schloss mem in Yiddish, right? The square mem. There's a nun, right? A regular nun, a nun seifis, we call a lange nun. And there is a tzaddik, a regular tzaddik, and again, a lange tzaddik. And we have it in pei as well, a lange fei, and you have it also in chaf. There's a regular chaf or a regular kaf, and a lange chaf, a long chaf. So this is unique. Only 5 letters in the whole aleph base have this second substitute letter, which has a different shape, and is usually placed only at the end of a word, right? We don't put a lange in the middle of a word. We don't put a schloss mem in the middle of a word. Only at the end of a word. In the middle of a word, the beginning of a word, there's always a regular mem. So Rabbi Yirmiyah says, where did these letters come from? Mansapach tzoifim amrum. The form of these 5 letters come from the Nevi'im. Rashi says, Nevi'ei hadoiris, the prophets of the generations. Okay? This is what Rabbi Yirmiyah says. Asks the Gemarah, V'tizbira. This is a fascinating thing. Where did these oisis come about? Why these 5 letters? What is their meaning? Yeah. So it's not so easy why do these 5 letters have it? There's a book from the Ezra, Rabbi Avram Ezra, one of the Rishonim, He lived in the 12th, 11th, and 12th century in Spain. He was a linguist, besides being a poet, a great poet, a philosopher. Of course, he wrote a commentary on Chumash. He was a very interesting person, Rabbeinu Avram ibn Ezra. And he has a sefer called Tzachos. Tzachos. Tzachos means, today it means a joke, anecdotes, but also comes from the word tzachos, means clarity. Tzach is clear. So there's a Shara Isis there. So the Ibn Ezra writes, it's very interesting. I guess it's a little anecdotal. He says, why these 5 letters? Why these 5 letters? So he says, these are the only 5 letters that can't stand because they're rounded on the bottom. They can't stand. So he says, when in the middle of a letter, they could lean and fall on the subsequent letter. But at the end of a letter, they have no subsequent letter. So they fall. So therefore, they have to be given a foundation because they shouldn't be round anymore. So the mem becomes a schlossmem. So it has every other letter, aleph, right? It stands. Beis stands. Gimel stands. Dalet stands. Hey stands. Vav stands. Zayin. But these 5 letters, they're rounded on the bottom, so they can't stand. They're wobbly. So therefore they, It's rounded on the bottom. It's supposed to be rounded, yeah. On the bottom, it's rounded. So therefore, he says they fall onto the subsequent letter. At the end of a letter, at the end of a word, they have nowhere to fall. So therefore, they have to become a schlossmem, a langenun, a langetzadik, a langefan, a langechaf, to be able to stand. That's what the Ibn Ezra writes about Oisis Mansapach.
What's the purpose then? It doesn't just rounded or fall. Are we playing with blocks?
Obviously, he's just
something more structural.
He's expressing an external layer of it, an external layer of the significance of it.
But some falls in itself. So.
It's a spiral. So. To give you an example of how Mansapach works, as you'll see it, Musaf of Shabbos, at least according to many texts, right? Musaf of Shabbos, after Ata Kadosh, we go through the whole Aleph base in the beginning of the words, but we start from Taf. Tikanta, Shabbos, Ratzisa Karbonesa, Tzivisa Perusha, Im Sidure Nesacha. Ma'angeha la'olam kavod yinchalu toyameha Chaim zochu. We're holding Zion. Vigam ha'oyhavim, right? Gedula bacharu. Oz. We finished. Oz. Right in the middle of a sentence. Aleph. But now, Misinai, Nitztavu, Tzivuye, Pa'aleha, Karoi. You see? That's Mansapach. You finish the Aleph base, now you go to Mansapach, because these are the double letters. Of course, here you don't have them as schlossmems and langenuns because it's the beginning. Misinai, Nitztavu, Tzivuye, Pa'aleha, Karoi. But that's just an example. Nusach Ashkenaz doesn't have this, but most of the Nuschayos, the Vilna Gaon writes that Mansapach, yeah, and you'll soon see how this fits very interestingly with the Gemarah, is an acronym of the only 5 halachos that Moshe Rabbeinu forgot. If you read through the whole Torah, there's 5 things that Moshe struggled with. He did not know what to say, and he had to go figure it out. You remember what those 5 are? So that would be, which letter? Tzadik, Tzlavchad. But let's start with the mem. What would be the mem? Somebody did something and Moshe didn't know what to do. Mekoshish, yeah, very good. Mekoshish Eitzim. The wood chopper, right at the end of Parshas Shlach, that's the mem. Yeah. The nun is Parshas Emor. Noikev Shem Hashem, the one who cursed God. Right, the son of Shleimus Bas Divri Lamate Don, who cursed Hashem. Noikev Shem Hashem, he didn't know what should be done. That's the nun. Okay. The tzaddik, you already said, the daughters of Tzlavcha, they said, our father died, we don't have any brothers, why shouldn't we get a lot in Eretz Yisrael? He came to Hashem, and Hashem said, Kain, b'nai Tzlavcha doivros. What's the fei, the pay? Well, Pinchas did it. But a halacha that Moshe, Pesach Sheni, very good, Parshas Baloischa. They said we're Tameh, Lama Negara, he didn't know. And finally, the last one was, you almost got the previous one, the Chaf is not Pinchas, but somebody else. Because Pinchas is not the doubt. Pinchas is the guy who knew what to do. Cosby Bastzur had relations with Zimri ben Salu, and Moshe didn't know what to do. It says everybody was crying, Moshe himself was confused. That's when Pinchas stood up. So the Vilna Gaon says these 5 letters represent the 5 doubts of Moshe Rabbeinu. Where did these letters come about? So Rabbi Yirmiyah comes and says, Tzoifim, the prophets somehow introduced these letters. Rashi says, Nevi'ei Hadoros, the prophets of generations. Interesting. In other words, Rashi says it wasn't one prophet. There was many generations. How does Rashi know that? It says Tzoifim. It says prophets. So Rashi assumes. It doesn't say one. It's probably many generations. But Rashi may have another proof. Another proof. It also comes from the Vilna Gaon. Right? The question is, why Mansapach? It's the wrong order. It should be, right? Chaf, Mem, Nun, Pei, Tzadik. So it should be Lashon should be Chaman Fatz. I know it's strange, but that's really the order, right? Mansapach, yeah. But if it was the prophets over generations, so one prophet added Mem, another one added Nun, another one added Tzaddik, another one added Fei. That's why it didn't end up in order, because it wasn't one. If one man did it, do it in the right order. Don't do it in the wrong order. Could be that's why Rashi says Nevi'ei Hadoros. Tosfos answers the question why it's called Mansapach is because they actually did what's called Lashon Neufel Lashon. Mansapach works very well with the word Min Tzoifayich. Tzoifayich means your visionaries, your prophets. So the letters themselves, the word Mansapach tells us it comes min Tzoifayich. He wouldn't have that in the other order. It comes from your Tzoifim. This is Tosfos' answer for the order. Frag the Gemarah, fascinating question. V'tizbira, Rabbi Yirmiyah really meant this? V'haksiv, we have a pasuk at the end of Parshas Bahar. This is how Sefer Vayikra ends. And I'm going to read the whole pasuk. Eila mitzvahs asher tziva Hashem es Moshe el bnei Yisrael bahar Sinai. These are the mitzvahs that Hashem commands to Moshe to give to the Jewish people bahar Sinai. And we say chazak v'nis chazek. This is the last pasuk of Parshas B'chukosa. Meaning, after all the halachas of Vayikra, which has an enormous amounts of halachas, from the beginning of Vayikra all the way till the end of B'chukosa, right? He finishes the last halachas about Tmura, about creating a substitute for a carbon, which you're not allowed to do. If you have an animal that's holy, you can't substitute another animal, and if you do, both of them become holy. He says, Eila mitzvahs. These are the mitzvahs that Hashem commanded Moshe to tell the Jewish people on Mount Sinai. That's the end of Vayikra. Yeah? Beginning of Bamidbar, already Bamidbar is not so focused on halacha. Bamidbar is focused on the counting of the Jewish people and the journeys of the Jewish people and the different revolts and the different problems and challenges and the spies and the kairach and so forth. So Eila ha-mitzvahs. Now, this pasuk would seem superfluous because obviously these are the mitzvahs. It keeps saying God told Moshe to tell this to the Jewish people. Obviously, it's a commandment. Like, let's say I give a speech and I tell my students or my children what to do, and then I say, and by the way, this is my speech. Yeah, obviously this was my speech. You gave dozens and dozens of commands, and these are the commandments. Obviously, so we learn from here something very powerful. Eila mitzvah tziva Hashem as Moshe. This teaches us, Eila, these are the only mitzvahs. Ein navi rashay lechadish davar meyata. No prophet in the world has the permission to say anything new after this. Eila, this is cut off. Eila ha-mitzvahs. Not these are the mitzvahs. Obviously, only these are the mitzvahs. It's over. In other words, you can have the greatest prophet in the world who says, last night I had a dream. And God came to me in a vision and he says there's going to be another mitzvah for Judaism. Or we're going to change a mitzvah. Or we're going to add a mitzvah. We're going to subtract from a mitzvah. So the Torah already says, the original document says, this is a lie. This never ever happened. Now, this is no small statement of our sages because this really is one of the most fundamental things about, let's call it the constitution of Judaism. Nobody in history, the greatest holy man in the world, even, we don't mean a fake prophet, he could be an authentic prophet. But this essentially delegitimizes him or her completely, if they're mechadesh or no mitzvah. Yeah. The Navi could caution the Jewish people to do mitzvahs, inspire the Jewish people, speak about the future, give an interpretation, explain something, warn, chastise, inspire, but not be mechadesh a mitzvah. Yeah. So I heard from God something new, and therefore we have a new mitzvah, or we take away a mitzvah, we change a mitzvah. The Navi, let's say, comes, God told me that Shabbos should become Sunday. Yeah? And he's a Navi. How do we know he's wrong? We don't accept it from this pasuk. Exactly. Mitzvahs, the Rabbanon, if the Rabbanon would wake up and say, this is part of the Torah, then it would be completely not legitimate. Mitzvahs derabanan are two types. One is a gate, a fence, right? For example, muktzah. Yeah, they're going to tell you don't move around a laptop on Shabbos. Don't move around your cell phone, your iPhone on Shabbos. They don't say that it's biblically prohibited. You're allowed to move around your laptop on Shabbos. It's not a problem. You're allowed to move around the hammer on Shabbos. You're allowed to move around the pen on Shabbos. The rabbis prohibited muktzah, and there was a reason they did it. For a very simple reason. If I move around my phone, what may very well happen? We all know our addictions, right? I'm going to check the messages. That's going to be a prohibition of Shabbos. So it's called a fence. When you have in your courtyard a very dangerous, if there's an electric station that people could, God forbid, get hurt, what's the responsible thing? To put a fence. And what if it's a nuclear reactor? What if it's really, really dangerous? You don't put one fence. You put, fortified walls. Yeah. When the Chazal was so, we often don't appreciate the impact of a sin. But they did appreciate it, so they made fences that somebody shouldn't get close to the dangerous zone. What do you need a fence for, right? But if your child was playing around a very dangerous place, yeah, or a cliff, you would be very happy when there's a fence. They saw an Aveira as a cliff, a real cliff. So the most responsible thing was to put on a fence. But they can't say the fence is biblical. That would be completely wrong. Another element of the rabbis is positive things. For example, they instituted Purim. Purim is not, they don't say Purim is biblical. They say, we are instituting Purim or Chanukah, right? Or washing hands before bread, or saying Hallel on Yom Tov or Rosh Chodesh, etc. Mitzvahs derabanan, lighting Shabbos candles. Lighting Shabbos candles. They're not going to say it's biblical. It doesn't say any way to light Shabbos candles. It's a mitzvah derabanan to light Shabbos candles. Yeah? Or davening Shemona Esrei. What?
Still einish when it comes to a mitzvah that was implemented
by the rabbis? Yeah, I mean a different type. Yeah, but it's a completely a different category. You can't compare. Now the question is, who gave them a right to do that? Oh, that's going to be the question. That's going to be the question. Who gave the rabbis the right to do this? The answer is part of the constitution of Chumash. Part of the constitution of Chumash, the pasuk says in Vayikra, Perek Yudches, Ushmartem es mishmarti. You should guard that which I said must be guarded. And from here they learned that they can make asu mishmeres limishmarti. You could create a fence in order to guard. Yeah. The Torah gives them a right to create negative things that you're not allowed to do. For example, chicken and milk is an example, right? You're allowed to eat chicken and milk. It says you're not allowed to cook a goat in the milk of its mother. You're allowed to eat chicken and milk. Rabbi Yossi Aglili used to eat chicken and milk. Chicken is not meat. The Chachamim said, since in culture people confuse chicken and meat, they're considered part of poultry. So therefore they said it. But they're not going to say it's a biblical aver. It's not. The same is true with the positive things that they added. But even a Navi can't be mechadash anything. In other words, if it's not in the Chumash, if it's not in the Torah, and there's no room for it in the constitution of Torah, it's out. It's completely out. Purim is not again. The Purim would be called a mitzvah derabana, like washing your hands before bread, mitzvah tumah, like halal. It's new, but it's not. It's new, but what's a loophole? No, but the Torah says that. Well, no, siyag is something negative that you don't do, like offense. That's one element. There's another element that the Torah, the Gemarah is going to discuss it later in the Daf. The Torah gave them also a right to make takanos, to make institutions. Yeah. But not as biblical obligations. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but not you can't call them mitzvahs min ha-Torah. You can't call them mitzvahs min ha-Torah.
Does someone get qualified to be the one to add a mitzvah or
well, that itself is in Torah. That itself has to be in Torah. You see, the Torah had to give a formula of how Judaism should function. Because you can't have in one book. Today you don't have this concept. Because the moment you don't have it already for more than 1,500 years.
Yeah, example, who would be known? When someone would be great, the other would be...
It's not relevant. You need to have Sanhedrin. There's no central body today that governs the Jewish people spiritually. It hasn't existed since the Sanhedrin were dissolved, and therefore we don't have any authority that can make a takana that will define all of Klal Yisrael. It doesn't exist anymore. Even prohibiting rice on Pesach. It couldn't be universal. It was for the Ashkenazic communities that lived under the Batei Dinim of Germany and France, right? The Sephardic communities were completely excluded from it. Yeah, a Sanhedrin, that the central body, and that's 71 people, ordained man for man till Moshe Rabbeinu. You understand what that means? Ordained person to person, direct, uninterrupted link. And the qualities to be one of those 71 people are also articulated in Torah. What are the qualities to be? Yeah? If you have Sanhedrin that are a bunch of charlatans, yeah, it's nothing, it's worthless. That's one of the reasons they dissolved the Sanhedrin, because the moment it lends itself to corruption, you destroy the fabric of the Jewish people. In other words, for Sanhedrin to function, it has to be immune to any criticism, to any corruption. Because if not, you just destroy the people. Because you have a central body that can contaminate and poison the fabric of the people. So since the Sanhedrin were dissolved, there's no takana anymore that's mechayev all of the Jewish people. No prohibition and no positive takana. Right. But let's say a Navi wants to come manipulate Chumash and say Shabbos is not Shabbos, Shabbos is Sunday. Or God said that today you don't eat kosher anymore because the hygiene is good. The whole reason for kosher was hygiene. Yeah? So you don't eat kosher anymore. You can eat any food. That would be a Navi being mechadish a davar, Eila ha-mitzvahs. These are the mitzvahs. There's nothing new. You can't change, manipulate, subtract, or add a mitzvah in Torah. And even when the Chachamim add something, they have to find a source in Torah for it. They can't just wake up in the morning and say, we think we should add a new mitzvah. They're not allowed to do that. They have to have, we'll see later with Purim how they did it. Before they added Purim, they had to find in Torah that God really wanted they should do Purim. If not, they couldn't add it, or Chanukah, or anything else. It's fascinating. So even when they add, it doesn't say in Chumash Saf Purim, obviously. It was written before. But they had to find something in Torah. In other words, it's not like they could come, wake up one day and say, you know what, we're prohibiting chicken, we're prohibiting this. Everything has to be sourced. What were you doing? Based, and then if the Torah gives the formula, and sometimes they'll debate it, and you follow the majority also. It's going to be discussed at length how it happened, Purim. So what's the problem here? The problem is, how can Rabbi Yirmiyah say this? That after Har Sinai, yeah, basically there's going to be new letters. I mean, that's a serious thing. So you'll say, what's the big deal? They added letters. They didn't just add letters. When you add letters, Mem, Nun, Sadik, Pei, Ches, Pei, Chaf, you're actually making a change in the mitzvahs. Because if somebody would have written a Sefer Torah before the Nevi'im with a Shloss Mem or a Langenon, right, it would have been disqualified. It's the wrong letter. They now basically change, and they change the halachas. You understand? So they're changing a mitzvah. I'm writing tefillin, yeah, and at the end of a letter, at the end of a word, I make let's say a Shloss Mem, right? Ukshartam la'ois al yedchem. Before the Nevi'im, it would have been a regular mem, right? And if I would have made a square mem, this tefillin is not good. They changed the halacha, yeah? It's a different alphabet. Suddenly you could write these letters at the end of a word, and it's exactly the way they're read. So the way we understand it now is that, he says, Tzoifimam, they added these, in other words, before that there were only regular mems, regular nuns, regular. That's what the Gemarah is asking. Did they really update the Bible? Did they really say we're changing it? There's 5 new letters to use at the end of every word. How can they do such a thing? And remember, it's not just a little technical thing. Before they did it, it would disqualify the tefillin or the mezuzah sefer Torah. So they're not changing. Same words. It's just the form of the letter. It wouldn't change the meaning, but it would still change it.
Who wrote the Torah? Who wrote the Torah in its current form? With the Soif Mem, with the Nun.
That's the question of the Gemarah. Who did this?
No, because I think you're asking about script assurance. That much came. What we have now, it came much later.
Now you're asking a good question. You're asking a good question, and that is, there's a famous Gemarah in Sanhedrin of Chaf Aleph and Chaf Beis about the script of the Sefer Torah. There's 2 scripts, something called Ksav Ivri, something called Ksav Ashuris. According to some opinions, Ezra HaSofer who lived in the beginning of Bayis Sheni. He made the Aliyah from Babylonia back to Eretz, right? He changed, according to some, not all, changed the writing, the ksav, the script of the Sefer Torah. Till his day, they used to write a Sefer Torah in what's called ksav ivri. And it changed to ksav ashuri. Ksav ivri means literally a Hebrew script. It comes from the tribes who lived in Iraq on the other side of the Euphrates River. That's why it's called ivri. The word ivri comes from the word Aver Hanar, the other side of the river. Avram came from the other side of the river and he came to Canaan. They called him an ivri, a Hebrew. So this was a script that came from the other side of the Euphrates River. It still appears, if you go to the Israeli Museum or similar museums, British Museum, you could still see that script. Most Jews would not be able to read it today, very few, even though that's the original Hebrew language, but it still appears on many old coins from the time of the second Beis Hamikdash. Until today, the Samaritans use that script, which the Gemarah discussed. The Shomronim, who live in the north of Eretz Yisrael, the Samaritans, they still use the Ksav Ivri. Ezra changed it, and he instituted the new Ksav, which we are all familiar today in the Sefer Torah, called Ksav Ashuri. Ksav Ashuri, which, according to that opinion, comes from Ashur. It's the script that comes from Assyria, and that's what we use today for Sifrei Torah, for Tefillin and Mezuzahs. This, most Jews are familiar with. Okay? The Gemarah gets to know, is that true or not true? Some say it's completely not true. They always had Ksav Ashuri, etc. But there is an opinion. We could see today there's two scripts. Sometimes they find old stuff with another script. From Ivri. There are scrolls that they found have a different ksav. So that means Ezra changed the script, not the words, right? But it would just be how the words are written. There's the difference of an aleph in ksav Ivri and aleph in ksav Ashuri. It's the same Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'sa'aretz, but it's written in a different way. Yeah. If you say that, then we wouldn't have a problem with Mansapach. If Ezra can change the script, they can also change the script. It's a font, yeah? It's a font. Mem, Schloss Mem, same thing. I'm not changing the meaning of a mitzvah. I'm not making Shabbos Sunday. I'm not saying the seventh day means the first day. I'm not saying Yom Kippur, you don't have to fast. I'm not saying that. I'm just changing the font. What's the big deal? Right? Even that the Gemarah is upset about. Why doesn't the Gemarah ask this question about Ezra? The answer to this is because the Gemarah says over there that Ezra couldn't do it on his own. Ezra found a source in the Torah that there's going to be a day when the script is going to change. And the source is, it says in Dvarim, V'kasav loy es mishne ha-Torah hazois. There's going to be a second way of writing the Torah. That was the source. Ezra didn't just come and change it. Who gave the Nevi'im a right to introduce a new font into the Sefer Torah and disqualify the other font? I told you, at the end of a letter, if I in the olden days, I would write a Langenun, sorry, you got the wrong letter, right? It's like writing a Z instead of a Zion. Doesn't work. It's a Z. It's a Z in English, but you need a Zion, not a Z. You understand? That's the problem. It would be possible. If you write a Z instead of a Zion, it says Z. I'm not changing the meaning. Laman tizkiru. Yeah, Tav, Z, Chaf, Reish, Vav, right? They're going to disqualify it. Exactly. So just because it looks like a holy mem, what's the difference? Another problem is the Torah's mem b'samach shebeluchas b'nesa yoimden. The mem and the samach and the luchos stood there by a miracle. This is fascinating. The Torah tells us that the luchos that Moshe brought down, the tablets, were engraved, but not engraved like a tombstone. Engraved me'aver el aver, meaning engraved through and through. The whole thickness of the luchos were engraved. It wasn't just you engraved an aleph in the stone, so you have an aleph or a beis. It went through and through. So here you have a problem. All the letters work because you engrave an aleph, right? So you engrave an aleph and you cut around it, but you still have a contiguous connection with the rest of the tablet, besides two letters. Schloss mem and samach. Why? Because when you're engraving a schloss mem, so the middle piece, right? You're engraving. How is that middle piece holding? When you have a samach, that middle piece, if it's not through the whole thickness of the tablets, we're good. You engrave a schloss mem and you have a square, and it's good. There's still rock on the backdrop. But when you go through and through, so your middle tablet, your middle square mem falls out. So he says, Mem v'samach beluchas b'nes hayom. 1 second. The luchas come before the Nevi'im. The luchas come before the Sefer Torah. A regular mem wouldn't have this problem. A regular mem, right? Because you can engrave a regular mem through and through. It's not an issue because it has a connection to the external stone of the tablet. This is only a schloss mem. But you just told me that the schloss mems came from the Nevi'im. So how could Reb Chizda say mem v'samach shabeluchas b'nes hayom? What do we see from here? That in the luchas you already had a mem stuma, a schloss mem, which is one of the letters of Mansapach. What are you telling me that the prophets created it later? This doesn't make sense. These are two big problems. So the Gemarah says you're right. You're right. Meheva hava. These letters were always there. That's why there was in the luchas as well. The difference is it was never established what goes in the middle of the word and what goes at the end of the word, meaning there was no system. When you're a sefer writing, you could put a schloss in the middle of a word. You could put a langen in the middle of a word. You could put a langen in the middle of the word. You could put a regular fe at the end of a word. It was not established. So the prophets came and they instituted that the open letters should be in the middle or the beginning of a word, and the stumen, the concealed mem, the schloss mem, and the other ones should be at the end of a word, like we do today. So they didn't invent a new letter, a new font that never existed. They just established where and how it should be used. The regular mem should be used in one way, and the schloss mem should be used in another way. That's the pshat. So everybody could calm down. The schloss mem was there by the luchas, and everything is good. Says the Gemarah, soif, after everything's said and done. Eila ha-mitzvahs. We're back to the pasuk. Eila ha-mitzvahs. Ein novi asid l'chadash davar meyata. A prophet is not going to be mechadash anything new. So how can they even establish where you should use each letter? Why is that not called a chidush davar? Why is that not called a new thing? Even that, let's say the letters were there, but they're the ones who decided that this goes here, and this goes there. This goes in the middle of a letter, in the beginning of a letter, and this goes at the end of a letter. So even that's a chiddush. They didn't invent it, that's his point. It was always there. They didn't invent it. But it was never established. Every cipher can do as he wants. He could put it in the middle of a letter, the end of the letter. They came and they said, no, this is how it has to be. The schloss mem only at the end, and the regular mem in the middle. Ask the Gemarah, soif, a novi. Now, what's the soif? Like after everything's said and done, what? Is this a good answer or not a good answer? Is the first answer a good answer? I saw there's a Sefer Yad HaMelech on Rambam. He says, look how the Gemarah changes the first question from the second question. It's very interesting. The first question was, Ein Navi Rashayi L'Chadash Davar. The second question, Ein Navi Asid L'Chadash Davar. You see the difference? A Navi is not allowed to, a Navi won't. Why does he change? In other words, there's two separate halachas. We explained that it's not a chiddush anymore. Ein navi rashaya l'chadash davar. A navi is not allowed to be mechadash. They weren't mechadash. They weren't mechadash anything. Why were they not mechadash? Because the letters were there. But the Gemarah says soif was still a problem. Ein navi asid l'chadash davar meyata. We have a tradition that the Nevi'im are not going to be mechadash. Not rashaya. Not that they're not allowed to. They're not going to be mechadash anything. You see, the Gemarah changes from rashaya to asid. And here we have an exception for that. They just said, no, we're making a new system. We're making a new system in Torah. And this becomes a critical system. There is a machlokes in Gemarah. What happens if you put today, after this, if you put at the end of a letter a regular mem, is it possible or not? Or the other way, if you put in the middle of a letter a shlos mem, right? So there's a debate about it. According to some, it would be possible. That means they did make a chiddush mamish. They mamish did make. It would also change a mitzvah because before that it was allowed and they said it's forbidden. Yeah? And it would be possible. It would be possible min ha-Torah. How can they do that? But even if you say not, ein navi asad lechadish davar mayata. So the Gemarah is still left with a problem, and the Gemarah's answer is Ella. No, it's not what happened. Let me tell you what happened. It was always there. It was all from Har Sinai. Everything was there. Shachachum, at some point the scribes forgot. V'chazru v'yazdum. And they forgot the system, and they used to write like this or like this, both ways, because they didn't know. And the visionaries, the prophets came and re-established the right structure for both of these types of letters. That's all that happened. So there was no chiddush, and it was always there. It just got forgotten at some point, and that's what Rabbi Yirmiyah means. So from they just re-established, they brought back a sacred tradition and institution that has been forgotten. That's it.
So this also makes sense, like, they had lost the letters of the words because they were, the way they were writing, without the dots, without anything. And special letters at the end of the word made it much easier to read.
Yeah, perhaps, yeah. No periods, no question marks, no exclamation points. This showed everybody that it's the end of a word. We understand the value of it. Yeah. The problem in the Gemarah now is, what do you mean they forgot it? You forget something that's uncommon. Yeah. Every Jew wore tefillin. Open up tefillin. Every house has mezuzahs. Open up a mezuzah. Maybe they forgot it. I understand. At one point, the Jews stopped. If they stopped writing tefillins, their mezuzahs for 200 years. So now they forgot, how do we do the shlos mem? Where do we do the mem? So they had to have the nevim. But there was no interruption. So then, go to your shul, or wherever you go to the places that had a Sefer Torah. It's true, it's not like today that the Sefer Torah were everywhere. Fine. But you have tefillin, you had mezuzahs, you had some Sefer Torah. Open it up, and you'll see how to do it. When you shachachum, how do you forget this? Huh? So in Russia, I can understand. So Tosfos answers that it's like Russia. That basically what happened was, Tosfos said in the name of Rabbi Notam, there was Menashe, the king of Yehuda, lived for 55 years. He was one of the most heinous kings of Judea in history. Right? He killed his own grandfather, Yeshaya Hanavi. He had a son whose name was Ammon, and he was, what they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and he burnt the Torah during the time of his kingdom, and therefore it was forgotten. And the Nevi'im were the Nevi'im that came after Ammon, the son of Menashe, when the letters were forgotten. That's what Tosfos says. But many people say, one second, even if he burned the Sefer Torah, even if he burned many Sefer Torah, you still had the Aron and the Beis HaMikdash. The Aron and the Beis HaMikdash had the Luchas. Right? You say clearly in the Luchas there was a shlos mem. In the Luchas there was regular letters. So you could look over there because the Luchas were only concealed by Yoshiyahu, who was the son of Ammon, who was Menashe. Menashe had a son, Ammon. Ammon had a son, Yoshiyahu. Menashe's father was Chizkiah. He was a big tzaddik, but Menashe and Ammon were Rishayim. Yoshiyahu was a tzaddik. He was killed by the Egyptians. And Yoshiyahu, he's the one who concealed the Aron because he saw this is probably going to be destroyed, the Beis HaMikdash. So he concealed. But in his days, there was still an Aron with Luchas. So they could have checked it. They checked it Luchas. Not only that, it says clearly in Tanakh that Yoshiyahu found the Sefer Torah, his Chilkiah found the Sefer Torah in the Beis HaMikdash that was not burnt. So it's not only the Luchas, Yosef had a Sefer Torah. And also, does Tosfos really believe that Ammon, who was only a king for 2 years, burnt every tefillin in Eretz Yisrael? Every mezuzah in Eretz Yisrael? Every Sefer Torah in Eretz Yisrael he burnt in 2 years of a king? Huh? So if communism went for 70 years, they did a good job. You asked Rabbi Avram, you wanted to make a Seder for Pesach. How did you celebrate? How did you find the Haggadah? Encyclopedia. Jewish encyclopedia. To get a Haggadah on Pesach in Russia, he had to use a Jewish encyclopedia on the Passover in Russian to be able to have some text of the Haggadah. Okay. So communism did a good job. They had 70 years, right? Oman was a king for 2 years. He burnt every mezuzah in France. In France, they managed to burn, right? 12,000 volumes of the Talmud. Okay, they did it. They did it. It's a very concentrated effort. So they're saying the whole Eretz Yisrael, there was no mezuzahs left, no tefillin left, no... Perhaps, that's what Parshas means, perhaps. But it's a big chiddush to say that. And therefore they forgot it. Like, it was just forgotten, and the Nevi'im had to come back and say, let's start over again. But it's a gewaldige Kapelle. It's a gewaldige Kapelle. So I want to tell you the answer of the Ritva. The Ritva gives a different answer to the Gemarah, how they forgot it. And he goes back to the question of how the script of the Sefer Torah was original. Was it originally Hebrew language or Assyrian language? Ksav Ivri or Ksav Ashuri? Right? You remember there's two opinions in the Gemarah and Sanhedrin. If it changed through Ezra or did not change. The Sefer Torah that we read today, if the Jews from the first temple would read it, would they be able to read the Parshas? They would say, sorry, this is no Sefer Torah. It's a very interesting question. Or it was exactly the same script. That's a big debate in Masechta Sanhedrin. So he says as follows. Yeah. If you say that the Torah was always written b'ksav Ashuri, that's one perspective. If you say that the Torah was written b'ksav Ivri, Ksav Ivri is a completely different font. Mamish, it's not like similar. It's mamish, a very, very different font. So then, in Ksav Ivri, all these letters didn't exist. The sound existed. Ah, ba, ga, da, ha. But the letters didn't exist. But what about the luchas? What about the luchas? Reb Chizda says that the mem and the nun and the samach were in the luchas. But the shlosmem is ksav ashuri, not ksav ivri. Right? So the Ritva says you have to say that the luchas, they had ksav ashuri. Even if you hold that the Sefer Torah was ksav ivri, the luchas had ksav ashuri. Right? And that's why there could be a shlosmem. But because Ksav Ashuri is considered the most sacred script, that's why Ezra introduced it. So therefore, then it was not allowed to be used for Sifrei Torah, only for the Luchas, and the Sifrei Torah was written by Ksav Ivri. That's why the Chizda says that the Mem and the Samach were in the Luchas, even though in Ksav Ivri you don't have a Shlosmem. You could look through Ksav Ivri. You don't have a Samach. And you wouldn't need a miracle. If the Luchas were written in Ksav Ivri, you wouldn't need a miracle. Is Araya? The Ritva says that the Luchas were written in a Ksav Ashuri. Therefore, once the Aron was hidden in the times of Yoshiyahu, you couldn't look at Sifrei Torah, Tefillin, and Mezuzahs, because they were all in Ksav Ivri. And they didn't have the luchas anymore, because the luchas he hid in the tunnels under the Beis HaMikdash. So you had no ksav ivri, you had no ksav ashuri. So therefore, as long as the luchas were there, they had some way of looking at it, but there was no reference point anymore. So that's why they forgot ksav ashuri, because they only had the luchas for that. And they didn't know, again, with a shlosmem, with a nun, what to do. They didn't know mansapach. Right? So therefore, you had to have the Nevi'im to teach them. And he says that's why Ezra can change the script. Because Ezra wasn't changing the script, he was just using the script of the Luchas. If it's good enough for God and the Luchas, it's good enough for Ezra and the Sefer Torah. That's the Ritva's fascinating interpretation, according to the opinion that the Sefer Torah wasn't always Ashuri, but it was Ivri. Then the Gemarah would make a lot of sense how they forgot it and they reestablished it. I'll just add that the Ritva asks on this, because he says that from Yerushalmi it seems like that the Luchas were also written b'ksav Ivri. So Hitaina is a little different, and that is that the first Luchas had ksav Ashuri. The first Luchas had ksav Ashuri, and that's what he means, that the Mem and the Samach were in a miracle in the first Luchas. But after the Jews sinned in the golden calf, they were not worthy of ksav Ashuri. So they were given the second Luchas and the Sefer Torah with Ksav Ivri, and the secrets of Ksav Ashuri were given over to Moshe Rabbeinu and a few individuals. But after the Anshe Knesset Agdola nullified the Yetzer Hara of Avodah Zarah, the Gemarah says that after the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, they nullified the Yetzer Hara of Avodah Zarah. People don't have any more a passion for Avodah Zarah like they used to have. The Gemarah says in Yuma, so therefore they were worthy of Ksav Ashuri. So the Ezra HaSefer went back to the Ksav of the first Luchos, Ksav Ashuri. So this is a little bit of a different interpretation, but it's similar concept, and therefore they forgot the letters of Ksav Ashuri, and they needed the Nevi'im to institute it. Okay. So that's what the Gemarah says, that the prophets chazrum v'yizdum. They brought it back to the consciousness of the Jewish people. It doesn't mean they brought it back, they were mechadish. They don't have a right to be mechadish. They used the information they received from previous generations that they had, or they realized it from the Torah. However, they figured it out, not through prophecy. God gave us a new prophecy, because that wouldn't work. As we said, a Navi can't be mechadish, but they used a tradition probably that they got from previous prophets. Okay. Listen, you were dealing with Talmidim who heard it from their teachers, right? And two people could sit in the same class. Said, no, he said to write it like this. He said to write it like that. He said that tzaddik has to look like this. Tzaddik has to look like that. Huh? Yeah, sometimes it's very serious. Like take a tzaddik, right? There's completely different. According to one, this would be apostle. Sometimes according to this.
It's interesting in the Dead Sea Scrolls what they found. They found both. Ashur's
and Ivri. No, listen, that there was a Ksav Ivri, we know. The Samaritans still have it. The question is the Sifrei Torah, how they were written before Ezra. We don't have a Sefer Torah that comes from before Ezra, so we don't know. We don't have Sifrei Torah from Bayis Rish. They found that Pirchas Koyanim. They found some. They found pieces of scrolls with pieces of Torah. And often Ksav Ivri. That's why most people can't decipher it. I mean, you look at it. You ever saw Ksav Ivri? Yeah. You look at it. You can't recognize the letters. It's a different font, a completely different font. Same letters, but a different font. There's Birchas Koyanim. I think the oldest fragment of a scroll they have from a Sefer Torah is from Bayis Rishon, Birchas Koyanim. They found it a couple of years ago. Birchas Koyanim, yeah, like an amulet. It looked like a kameya, an amulet. This was even before. Dead Sea Scrolls is already by Sheni, but this is, I think, mamash from before. So the Gemarah says, we'll do this piece. Rabbi Yirmiyah also said, again Rabbi Yirmiyah, or some say Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Targum shel Torah unkelus hager amorah. The translation of Torah into Aramaic comes from unkelus, the convert. Mipi Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Yeshua. It's based on what he heard from the two sages, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua lived in the century after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. Unkelus, from their mouth, used their teachings to write the translation of Torah, which we call Targum Unkelus in Aramaic. Targum Shel Nevi'im, translation of the prophets into Aramaic. Yonasan ben Uziel Amare. This comes from Yonasan, not from Unkelus. Mipichagi Scharia Malachi. Based on the teachings of the three prophets, Chagai, Scharia, Malachi. Yonasan ben Uziel lived much before Unkelus. He lived a century before the second temple's destruction, because Yonasan ben Uziel was a student of Hillel Hazakin, who lived approximately 100 years before Churban Bayesheni. Yonasan ben Uziel was his student. He is the one who's responsible for the translation of the Nevi'im. Unkelus lived a century later, after the Churban. The problem is Chagai, Scharia, Malachi were the prophets in the beginning of Bayesheni, which would mean a few hundred years before Yonasan ben Uziel. So obviously it doesn't mean that he heard it from their mouth, because it's a difference of 300 years, but it means that he received it from his teachers all the way back to the three prophets, Chagai, Scharia, Malachi. The Marsha makes this clear. V'nizdaza Eretz Yisrael arba meis parsa. When he wrote this Targum, Eretz Yisrael was shaken. It trembled. 400 parsa on 400 parsa, which is basically the territory of Eretz Yisrael. So basically the whole Eretz Yisrael was trembling. It was shaken up when Yonasan ben Uziel composed his translation. Yotzas Abaskel, a voice comes out v'amre and says, Mi yuzeh shegila story lebnei Adam. Who is the man who had the audacity to reveal my secrets to people? Amad Yonasan ben Uziel Araglov. Yonasan ben Uziel stood up on his feet, and he said, Ani ushagilisi storechel b'nei Adam. It's me. I take responsibility for revealing your secrets to humanity. It's known to you, you know very well I did not do this for my own glory. I didn't do this for the glory of the home of my father. I did this for your glory, so that the Jewish people should not end up splintered, filled with machlokes and disputations about how to interpret the psukim, but rather I wanted to give them a uniform interpretation to create unity among your children. Yonis ben Azil now wanted to do a new composition, a new volume to translate Ksuvim, not Nevi'im, but Ksuvim. Ksuvim would include, of course, the 11 books of Tehillim and Mishlei and Eiv and Shir Hashirim and Rus and Eicha and Koheles and Megillah Esther and Daniel and Ezra and Divrei Hayomim. Those are the books of Ksuvim. He wants to translate them. Yatzas Abaskel, the voice comes out of Amra and says to him, Loi, Da Yecha. Enough with Nevi'im, do not do the Ksuvim. My time, why Taka? Why Nevi'im, yes, and Ksuvim not? Mishum de Izbe, Kates Mashiach. Because in Ksuvim, which includes Sefer Daniel is one of the books of the Ksuvim, has what's called Kates Mashiach, an intimation for the end of days where Mashiach is going to come. And this is supposed to remain concealed. And if he would have translated the Ksuvim, it would have been revealed. And therefore, the Baskel told him, Da Yecha. So therefore, he did not do it. Rashi says, Shlo yirbu machloikas lefarish mikroyas hastumim, Kates Mashiach b'sefer Daniel, and thus Ezra did not, Yonis ben Azil did not go continue with Ksuvim. So the Gemarah clarifies, 1 second. V'targum shel Torah unkelos hager amarai. Do you really believe, is this true, that Unkelos is the one who authored the translation of Chumash, of Torah? V'amar Reb Ika bar Ravin, amar Reb Chanan al amar Rav. Reb Ika, in the name of Reb Chanan, in the name of Rav, taught, My Diksiv, the Pasuk says, when the Jewish people came back from exile, from Babylonia back to Eretz Yisrael, 42,000 Jews made Aliyah. Most of the Jews remained in Babylonia. So Ezra HaSofer is the one who rejuvenated the Jewish people. So the Pasuk says in Nehemiah chapter 8, a fascinating pasuk. Vayikru b'sefer Torah elikim. The people heard Ezra read the Sefer Torah. They read in the Sefer, the Torah of God, Meforish, it was explained. Meforish, it was explained. V'soim seichel, v'yavinu b'mikra. They put their minds to it, they put their seichel to it, to understand the pasuk, to understand the psukim. That's basically what he's saying. This is a pasuk in Nehemiah, Perik Ches, pasuk Ches. It speaks about the Jews come back and Ezra HaSofer reads to them the Torah. So they read the Torah and it's explained, it's meforish. They put their minds to it and they understand it. Now what does this mean? So he says like this, Vayikru b'sefer Torah elikim zeh mikra meforish. Reading the pasuk means they just read the pasuk. Vayikru b'sefer mikra meforish zeh mikra. I'm sorry, period. Again, Vayikru b'sefer Torah elikim zeh mikra. The first sentence, reading in the Sefer, means they Pashat read the words. Meforish, what's meforish? Zeh targum. This is a translation in Aramaic because many Jews did not understand Lashon Kodesh. They did not understand Lashon Kodesh. As the Pasuk says in Nehemiah, they spoke different languages, and therefore you had to explain it in Aramaic. Not just say, Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Leimer, but translate it. That's meforish. Next, what's Resoim Seichel? Elu HaPsukim. Remember, in a Sefer Torah, there's no periods, no punctuation, no question mark. Elu HaPsukim means where every pasuk begins and ends, because without that, it's very hard. You don't have sentences, run-on sentences, paragraphs. It doesn't stop. So psukim means like hefsek, interruptions, the beginning and end of a verse. Vayavinu b'mikra, elu piskei taimim. This is the trop, the nigunim, the taimim are the trop, the cantillations. Dam, da-dam, 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 dam. You see, we read the Chumash with Nakudis and punctuation, with an art scroll translation or Aryeh Kaplan translation, Amachaya. When you have only the text itself, it's the nigunim, the niggin, that allowed people, we're not used to it because we're not trained to listen to it because we don't need it. But if you need it, it's the niggin, the trop, that explains the story. So this is another element, Piskei Taimim. Va'amri, others say, V'yavinu b'mikras elu ha-mesayres. Mesayres is the traditions of which words are missing yuds, which words are filled. It's called chaseres v'yiseres. Chaseres v'yiseres means you have words, for example, basukais. It's written once, sometimes with a vav and without a vav. Basukais teishu shivas yamim. Is it written with a vav or without a vav? Many letters. This is called male or chaser. So it's not the trup that they read, but it's the mesoros, meaning exactly how the words are written, which are very, very significant. Different, like how many walls does a sukkah have? We learn from basukais with a vav or without a vav. Just an example. What do we see from here? That in the time of Ezra, there was already a translation into Aramaic. So why are you telling me Onkelos is the one who composed it? There was already a translation. So the Gemarah answers, Shchachum, you're right, they forgot it. V'chazru v'yistum, and Onkelos is the one who resurrected it. He brought it back to the Jewish people. So the same idea when we spoke about Mansapach, we're saying also about the Targum of Onkelos. We'll continue Be'ezer Hashem tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Well, you can explain it on your own, but apparently it seems here that Onkelos brought back, he didn't just write a new translation, then he brought back the original translation. Right, and that's very important, because why is it so important? Just write your own translation. Let's say I know that 300 years ago, you wrote an English translation to the Bible. I'll write my new translation. I have to go back to your translation. But we see here that he went back to Ezra's translation. Why was that so important? The reason that was so important is because the Gemarah tells us in Masechta Nedarim, Daf Lamed Zayin, that everything that Ezra taught them is what he received as a tradition from Har Sinai by Moshe Rabbeinu. So it was a very, very authoritative translation. So that's why some want to say that this Gemarah means that the Targum Onkelos really comes from Moshe, from Har Sinai, and it came over to Ezra, and then it was forgotten, and then Onkelos, based on his rabbis, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua, he brought it back. That's what some Rishonim want to say, which would mean Targum Onkelos has a sacredness that's discussed in Halacha, when we do Shnaya Mikra Echa Targum, right? Echa Targum, Targum Onkelos, because according to this, it's not Stam, he wrote an Aramaic translation. He read it and he said, okay, let me translate it, right? Fine, so he wrote an Aramaic translation. It's the Aramaic translation that Ezra used when he taught the Jewish people in the beginning of Bayesheni. There are the commentators and article Masifta, they bring, however, there's two different ways of saying this. The Ramah says in Shalsha Tshuvas or Ramah that it doesn't mean that Moshe at Har Sinai got the Targum Onkelos the way we have it, word for word in Aramaic. It means that sometimes the Targum adds different interpretations to a pasuk because it's not so clear in the pasuk. That's what he got from Moshe. In other words, the literal translation is a translation to Aramaic, but where he does an explanation, an insight, that he got from Moshe Sinai. In other words, he got it from Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yeshua, all the way back to Ezra, which comes from Moshe Rabbeinu. That is one interpretation that's brought by the Ramah from Mahari Padva. However, the Ramah himself argues, and he says, no, the Targum itself comes from Sinai. The Targum itself, in its language, not just the commentary that he included of ways of understanding the pasuk when there's ambiguity, but the Targum itself comes from Har Sinai. So that's a very interesting argument. How much do we attribute to sacredness of Targum Onkelos? Is it just the messages, or mamish the Targum itself, which is a whole different interpretation? That means the Targum Onkelos itself comes from Moshe Sinai. It almost has a quality of Kedushas HaTorah itself. So that's, but the bottom line is that we see that there was something from Ezra that Onkelos brought back. It's not just he wrote a new translation, like somebody says, okay, you forgot your translation, I'll write a new one. No, he didn't write a new one. It was something he took from Ezra. What did he take? Why can't he write a new one? If you understand Hebrew, just translate. If you have a good mastery. So either it means different insights that he inserted that you have to not manipulate, but explain the text a certain way, or mamish, the whole Targum that he got from Moshe Sinai. And that's the reason why it says in Halacha, it's brought about the sacredness of Targum Onkelos, because of this Gemarah that it comes from Ezra HaSefer.
If that's the case, why?
What are you going crazy from? Okay.
So
The Kedushas HaTorah, the name. Ah?
If the Targum was Mimoshe Sinai, so why did Hashem was angry with Targum of Navi? He revealed his secret in Torah. What's the Navi?
Excellent question. Excellent question. That's going to be the next piece of Gemarah. That's how I know it's a good question. Rabbi, it's clear? Mansapach.
Also, Monsey is very strange. If I would arrange it, I would arrange it in an order that assign numerical values.
So it is. In Sifrei Kabbalah and other Svarim, Tov is 400, yeah? Mem is 500. Langanun is 600. Langat Tzaddik is 700.
No, Langanun should be 700.
Huh?
Langanun is 700. Remember the one?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Chaf. My mistake. Chaf is 500. Schloss Mem is 600. Langanun is 700. And Langa Fei is 800, and Langa Tzaddik is 900. And that ends the letter, because next is 1,000.
So it should be a Hamon.
Right, that's what we asked before. Tosfos says Monsey Fayich, Monsey Fayich, it comes from your prophets. Tosfos said Daf Beis Amid Beis, he asks the question.
But I think it's a very non-pronounceable.
K'may kol Fayich. Yeah. Mishum Loshen Neufel al Loshen Nikra Mansapach Beloshen Seifayich. Loshen Neufel al Loshen. In other words, the language is appropriate. Loshen Neufel al Loshen.
The lettering of the second set of Seres Adibros that Moshe wrote had to have been different, of course, than the first that Hashem wrote.
So that's the question. If it was Ksav Ivri or Ksav Ashuriya. Ksav Ivri, Ksav Ashuriya.
But Moshe couldn't do the same.
Right. Yeah. So that's a question. If the Sefer Torah was always in Ksav Ashuri, it went through a change from Ivri to Ashuri. If it went through a change, then the Gemarah is understandable very well why they forgot it. Because according to Tosfos, it's hard to say that Amon Mamish destroyed every Sefer Torah. Amon, the son of Menashe, who was the son of Chizki, who was the father of Yoshiyahu, he was assassinated after 2 years. They killed him. Amon was assassinated.
What about the broken pieces of the first set?
No, the original Menashe was the son of Yosef. We're talking about Menashe Melech Yisrael, who was a son of Chizkiah, and he was not a good king. He did tshuva at the end, but after a lot of bloodshed.
He came from tribe of
Yehuda, Chizkiah's son. And Amon was Chizkiah's grandson, and Yoshiyahu was Chizkiah's great-grandson. So the great-grandfather and great-grandson were very righteous people. Yoshiyahu was special. He was killed by the Egyptians. We're going to see the next piece of Gemarah. But his father, Amon, was Yenetzatzka. It's an interesting thing, that in Kabbalah there's 4 names of Hashem. Ma, Sag, Av, and Ban. 45, 52, 63, 72. It's different ways of writing out Hashem's name. Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey fully creates different gematrias. Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey with Aleph is 45, 52. So it's interesting, Reb Shimshon Astrapala writes, Shimshon Astrapala, Hashem Yinkum Damai, he was one of the great Makabalim. So he writes that all of them, right, you take Ma, so it's first the Mem, then the Hey, 45. Sag, the larger letter, the larger number comes first. Sag, Av, 63, 72. But Ban is 2, 5. It's the opposite order. It should have been Nab. Ma, Nab, Sag, Av. First the larger letter and then the smaller letter. So he answers something fascinating, and he says that the definition of God, the definition of Hashem is truth, emes. Chaisamish LaKadosh Baruch Hu emes. The number of truth in the numbers is 9. Because 9, as many times as you multiply it, it's always 9. And the definition of truth is that it's always true. In other words, every angle, wherever you see it, wherever you encounter it, Emes is Aleph, Mem, Sav, the beginning of the alphabet, the middle of the alphabet, the end of the alphabet. In other words, Sheker are 3 letters near each other. Emes are the 3 furthest. Aleph in the beginning, Taf at the end, Mem in the middle. Because Emes is wherever you go, whichever angle you look at it, the beginning, the middle, the end, it pervades. If it's true, it's everywhere. It's reality. And reality is real. Huh? From any perspective, from any angle, the Ralbag writes in Mulchamas Hashem, Ha'emes maskim la'atzmei mikol tzad. Truth will verify itself from every angle. A lie, if you look at it from this perspective, from that perspective, if I ask you a couple of questions, if I wait till next year, But emes, you could wait till next year, you could wait 100 years, you could look at it from that perspective. If it's real, we're talking about real emes, not relative truth, but absolute truth. So it permeates, it's Rosh, Toich, Soif, emes. So therefore, you can multiply it 1 billion times, it's going to be truth. That's only 9. 9 is 2 times is 18. 1 and 8 is 9, right? 3 times 9 is 27. 2 and 7 is 9. You see, and you could continue doing this. 36, next one is 36. 3 and 6 is 9. You see, right? Yeah. 45, 4 and 5 is 9. Yeah. 54 is 9. 63. Now, you could trust me. You could go as many times as you want. You can go into numbers that are unfathomable. You're going to remain with truth. You're going to remain with 9. 9 always remains 9 because it's the misper of emes. Test. So Reb Shimshon Astropolis says, Ma Mem Hey is 9, 4, 5. Samach Gimel is 9. Ayin Beis is 9. But Nun Beis is 5 and 2. It's 7. The only name of Hashem that's not emes. But if you do Ban, so it's a Lain Genun, and a Lain Genun, we said, is 700. So then Ban is 9. That's why over there was changed. You understand? Because the Lain Gechaf is 500, right? Shloss Mem is 600. And Lain Genun, we explained that Mansapach continues the alphabet, like we see in the Musaf of Shabbos. So therefore, Lain Genun is 7. So Ban is 9. That's why that's the only name of Hashem that the order was changed. First the Beis and then the Nun. Because if you have Nun Beis, it's a regular Nun. It's only 700. It's only 7, it's only 7, not 9.
7 is an excellent number.
We love 7. We love 7. A regular Nun is 5. But Misper Katan, it's 5 or 50, right? Aber Lain Genun is doch von Oisius Mansapach. Tov is 400. Yeah? Lain Gechaf is 500. Shloss Mem is 600. Lain Genun is 700. Lain Gepei is 800. Lain Getzadik is 900. Push it, because we have till 400. So what's 500? So the next letters are the you understand? So therefore, Lain Genun is 700. So Ban, with a Lain Genun, would be 2 and 7. So you're good, so it's 9. But if it would be Nun Beis, it would only be 2, 5 and 2, so it would only be 7.
They have taken out of it.
Verstehst? So Melitz emes. So Melitz emes.
People, when the Bible translated into the language of the right, people were against it.
Yeah.
In Aramaic, they did it. Partial Ferverish, a lot of people were against it.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, every translation is a challenge. Yeah, if you got the essence. Gemarah says when you translated the Torah into Greek, right? So darkness came down to the world for 3 days. Gemarah says, like the day of the eagle. The day of the eagle, because they translate into Greek.
Yeah. They might lose the meaning of it.
It loses the meaning, and the translation was a pressure that came from Ptolemy. So it was a pressure. They were forced to do it. And that manipulates. Every translation is a sacrifice. That's what it is. It's a sacrifice. Of course, you often make that sacrifice because the alternative is much worse. People are left with nothing. Yeah. But there were those who opposed that translation too. They said you're taking away from the original, and people will get lazy. Yeah.
Rabbi Malinowitz.
Zchrono Levracha. Chaim Malinowitz.
Beit Shemesh. He was one of the underpinnings of Art Scroll.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how
He was a tremendous Talmud Chacham
Question.
and a great man. He was a great man.
Absolutely.
Very refined man.
The first Sarasadiros were broken and were picked up by Moshe, and they were put into the Aron. So the miraculous nature of the first Sarasadiros, were they destroyed then? I would think so.
Well, the Gemarah says that luchais v'shivrei luchais monachim ba'aron, meaning they put into the aron the broken pieces and the regular second luchas. It was all in the aron. Baba Basra Daf Yadalet.
Was there therefore a means to compare the first luchos and the lettering
They
to the second set of luchos?
They retained the broken pieces of the
So we always
luchas.
had a Masorah then. Of the
Yeah, but they were broken. It was broken.
But
according to their advice,
it didn't have the miraculous nature.
Right,
anymore.
of course.
It couldn't have.
Yeah, and you probably also couldn't see letters so
therefore,
clearly.
You didn't have the ability to make this comparison.
Yeah. That's what the Shalsachuvas Radvaz says. I discussed earlier. Radvaz says that the first luchas were written b'ksav Ashuris, but already the second one's not.
Okay.
Interesting how the Goyim in Korea learning it.
Thank you very, very much.
A lot of hatzlacha, pleasure to have you all the way from Eretz Yisrael.
Pleasure. You can't imagine. It's really my pleasure.
Was macht der Bleibel? Ksav Ivri is a mamash Ein Akshuri. Ashuri. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. But they're similar. They're still similar.
The main Prophet TV to write.
No, what the Even Ezra means, it sounds like an anecdote, but it's not. It's serious. His point is that they wanted to show the difference between a letter in the middle of a word or a letter in the beginning of a word or a letter at the end of a word. What's the difference? A letter in the beginning of a word is still part of a single word. There's going to be other letters that will make up this word. A letter in the middle of the word is still connected to other letters. Not only forward, but also, not only backwards, but also forward. But a letter at the end of the word finishes the word, and now is a new word. Now today, we all know the difference between words because there's a lot of space between them. But one of the methods in order to show the distinction between one word and a new word is that the letter at the end of a word you make in a distinctive way. You show that it's disconnected to any subsequent letters. It stands on its own because it's the end of a word. You understand? That's what Even Ezra is saying. So when you have the Chaf and the Mem and the Nun and the Tzadik and the Pei, Man Tzapach, Mem Nun Tzadik Pei Chaf, if you would use the regular Mem Nun Tzadik Pei Chaf, what does it look like? All of them are rounded on the bottom according to the Even Ezra. They don't stand, so to speak, on their own. They are wobbly and they fall down and lean on the subsequent letter. But at the end of a letter, you want it to be self-contained. You want it to be able to have its own confidence, its own strength. So it doesn't need a subsequent letter, which is the Even Ezra's way of saying that this is the end of a word. So what showed the reader right away this is the end of the word? That this stands on its own. In other words, it's not connected to the letter afterwards, because the letter afterwards is a new word. You understand? That's what he means to say. And that's why they made a shlos mem and a line nun and a line tzadik and a line fe and a line chaf, because now the letter is standing on its own, which means it's not connected to the word afterwards, which means it's the end of a word, and therefore there's a hefsek, there's a separation between this word and another word. Yeah. That's what basically the Even Ezra is explaining. Every other letter stands on its own. Aleph stands on its own Beis, because Beis is flat on the bottom. And Gimel and Dalet and Hey, every single letter. You can't compare the Beis to the Chaf. The Beis is flat on the bottom, and the Chaf is round on the bottom. The same is true, the Mem is round. And the Nun. Right? The Ayin has a foundation. All of them have foundation. Taf as well, and Shin as well. Every single one. And the Kuf and the Reish, but the Mem, Nun, Tzadik, Pei, Chaf. Yeah. You're asking about the Mem, why is the left leg of the Mem not good enough? It could be, according to the Even Ezra, that has to be a little round, or maybe because it's shorter, to drop shorter, it doesn't go down all the way, so therefore that's not the foundation, and the part that is the foundation is rounded. Yeah. Al-Pi Kabbalah and Zohar and Sifrei Kabbalah, Mem Nun Tzadik Pei Chaf also represent what's called the hefsek of the light, meaning every letter is an energy, and every word is the energy of all the letters, and the sum total of all the letters, which is even a greater energy. All the letters together create a word. And these 5 letters represent in Kabbalah what's called Hey Gevuros, meaning the 5 features, like the 5 fingers of the left hand, represent 5 dimensions of Gevura, which represents restriction, holding back, containing, restrictiveness. In other words, they represent the ability to hold back the energy, that it shouldn't flow and cross the boundaries that it doesn't have to cross. So the oisius sophiyos, the letters that complete words, they represent that. Mem not nun tzaddik pei chaf represent what's called the Hey Gvura, the 5 dimensions within Gvura, which contains the energy, because energy has to be contained. It has to be where it has to be, but it's not supposed to flow where it's not supposed to flow. So that's represented by these 5 letters. And in Kabbalah, there's a very big discussion about the significance, why the Mem, and why the Nun, and why the Tzaddik, why the Pei, why the Chaf. Yeah, it's beyond our discussion today.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.